It's an issue of the mainstream media dying. It's an issue of the government not having credibility. It's an issue of the fact they tried to lie to the public and said he didn't have any property rights to it when they had the surface forage and water rights since 1877. The BLM tried to buy his land a decade ago because he did have rights. He just didn't physically own it. He had the grazing rights, and they played on public ignorance. Even Fox News put out reports. I couldn't believe it watching it yesterday and the day before, and even some mainline conservative talk show hosts acting like Bundy was cheating the taxpayer, not paying grazing rights. When his great, was it said 6 generations ago, 7 generations, he said? It was 7 generations ago when that wasn't even a territory. And they went out there. That's when they got the rights. And the public is just so ignorant about law. And there's the law of the gun now with government. The government had a bunch of guns. And when I saw the paramilitary BLM they called out in the confrontation that happened yesterday, the historic standoff, they looked like serious paramilitaries, not like normal BLM. And they were all ready and looked eager to start shooting people. Just a simple bloodlust. But I do know a lot of police and people here in Austin. I ran into 2 yesterday, strangely enough, that were following our Facebook, following others, watching the videos online. And we're just so happy that the citizens didn't get shot up in a firefight or the BLM. But we're rooting for the people. Just the 2 cops I ran into yesterday. I talked to somebody else who ran into a cop and heard them listening to my show off duty as a security guard, listening to the show, and they said, oh, you listen to Alex Jones? Oh, yeah, I'm so glad this didn't end violently. At a crowd of close to 1,000 people saying that if they cross the line onto Bundy's grazing land, which he owns the rights to, the surface rights, the water rights, the forage rights, cut and dry. The governor's on record. People are ignorant. The mainstream media plays all these games. Tries to say, well, he didn't pay his grazing fee that they announced 10 years ago when he wouldn't sell his property to him. We now learn to build a Chinese government-controlled solar farm that Harry Reid and his son make money off of. And by the way, that broke 2 years ago, but we broke it on Friday that he was connected into it. It was known that was going on. Upwards of 90% of Nevada is now claimed to be federal. Another 5% state, so 5% is privately owned. The Bundys are on record, and it's filed with the state once it became a state, that in 1877 they founded the Bundy Ranch that 7 generations had ranched and farmed on. And then 10 years ago, they forced all the other farmers and ranchers to sell, 52 families. Bundy would not sell. I think he has like 18 kids or something. I mean, just a true Americana. And as this built the last few weeks, Infowars.com was the first national, international outlet to cover it. Drudge, the largest news aggregator in the world, the powerhouse, because it can set the agenda of what people are looking at and reading, picked up our story. It became a national story. Fox News, CNN picked it up. All the big national talk show hosts picked it up. And there was a big debate. Some national talk show hosts understood it about grazing rights and common law and all the rest of it. Others didn't. It was very disappointing to see Fox News and other people that I'm not even going to name. Folks heard it. Saying the Bundys are stealing from taxpayers. You're supposed to pay grazing rights. No, you're not when you were on the land and built the water pipes and the cisterns and the windmills in the last 100-plus years, last 140-plus years. I mean, my family is in ranching. My family got their land in Mexican land grants in 1829. Other parts of our family land that we still hold on to, after Mexico was kicked out of Texas, we just moved in and said it was our farm. That's how that works. And guess what? It's ours today. So I know how this works. When you got a lot of land, you get land disputes and all the rest of it. So we've dealt with this my whole life, okay? My dad goes to court all the time, represents himself and wins, dealing with land issues. So I know this whole situation. And I went and looked it up. And the governor came out and said, no, he's got grazing and surface rights and water rights. But the feds played on everyone's ignorance and said, man, you just got some crazy old guy in a cowboy hat out here, mad. Folks, they had cattle crossing signs on the major state and federal highways out there. They had cattle guards, fences he put up. pipes and windmills his great-great-great-granddaddies put up. Some of those cisterns were over 100 years old, rock cisterns with wells where you see windmills, they pump water up where the wildlife comes to drink. It's an oasis for the turtles, the deer, the antelope, the cougars. This is how humans make the desert better. And it turns out there's natural gas and oil there. We've confirmed that. And we got the federal documents on Friday where Harry Reid and the Chinese-backed company, it's a Chinese company, government-backed Chinese company, have a deal starting on 129 Mile, that's CBS News, from southern Nevada on his property, where he has the service rights, all the way up the western part of the state. And they were going to put a solar farm directly on that and the adjacent ranches they've taken. And Harry Reid, just like Solyndra, all the rest of it, his family was right sitting in the middle of it. The head of the BLM, his former chief of staff. You want me to keep going here? And what really got folks mad was over the week, paramilitary BLM showed up, and if you were anywhere in the county on the side of the road, they would taser you and beat you and attack you, including women, and said no free speech and put a little orange free speech pig pen up and said that's where you can go. And the governor said take that down, by the way. These are state highway right-of-ways. You can't do that. So the governor did get involved under some pressure. But it really got crazy, and everybody saw those Tiananmen Square-style images of the German Shepherds attacking people and the tasers going into men and women and all the rest of it. Now, you can see those videos up on Infowars.com. Drudge picked all that up while Fox and CNN and MSNBC would not show any of it at first and would say this crazy old man's in there robbing people, basically, and stealing, taxpayer money, not paying range fees, which they arbitrarily threw on there, and which they had their corrupt federal courts rule. Well, what do you do when the courts become corrupt? At a certain point, the juries, the grand juries, and the people have to nullify them, and that's what happened. So they were going to march onto the property yesterday morning, and the sheriff backed off, and the BLM backed off, and they said, okay. They said, we are going to pull out of here and not round up any more of your 800 head of cattle. But the 300 they had in pens, they weren't going to release. He gave them an ultimatum of 1 hour and said, we're coming through your line. And folks, the police on loudspeakers said, we're going to shoot you, and they still walked past them. The tanks stood down. They had multiple giant black armored vehicles they had in Iraq. They've been bringing in to fight locals. Now confirmed it's for that. And, of course, the big reason, when this happened Friday, when we learned Friday that it was a Harry Reid Chinese government land grab and that the main solar farm, just like Solyndra, was going to be based in his ranch where he has the service rights on record, registered with the state, as the governor admits. That's why he told the feds to stand down. They still didn't. He has those rights, and they didn't want to pay him for them. They offered him paltry sums 10 years ago and again 4 years ago to sell out his rights. And he said, I can't live off that. Plus, I've been here forever. No. And so their answer was, just 2 weeks ago nearby, they shot a kid on a bicycle, a teenager, who didn't stop on his 10-speed. BLM shot him in the back. I mean, imagine, there's no one out there but BLM. They're not controlling the border, and they just come over and harass you. I've been harassed by the BLM. Again, this is about the mainstream media not being able to lie and spin. It's about government not having credibility. It's about more than half the West being under federal control, 90% of Nevada, 80% of other states in many of those areas. And they're just kicking everybody off. They're tearing up the roads. They're kicking people off that had grazing rights, people that actually own the property they're kicking off, who have ranches inside these areas. And it's a stated agenda to get us off and get us dependent, while beef is at all-time highs. And the feds were saying, we're about to play this video, we're going to shoot you if you come on this property. That the governor already said, no, Bundy's got the service rights. He did. I mean, it's the law. And the feds just say, well, we're the law, we're going to ignore that. Kind of like Benghazi or Fast and Furious or the Attorney General refusing subpoenas. And now members of Congress are saying, you should be in jail. You've got to call it what it is. When it's criminal, it's criminal.